This is Benjamin. In 2021, Benjamin established a trust for the benefit of his children and grandchildren. These are Benjamin's grandchildren, Vanessa and Simon.
Hello there.
Hi guys!
This is Bella, Benji, and Brandon. They are Benjamin's children. Benjamin also appointed his trusted friends, Nathan and Samantha, to act as trustees. The trustee grants the trustees discretion to distribute the income among the beneficiaries as they think fit. In 2024, the trustees allocated 70% of the income equally between Brandon and Benji, while Bella received only 30% of the remaining balance. Dissatisfied with this unequal distribution, Bella suspects the trustees acted with bias due to personal dislike of her. She has demanded an explanation for their decision, along with access to any documents detailing the reasons behind the income distribution. Additionally, Bella wants to inspect the trust accounts, claiming Nathan and Samantha have failed to audit them since the trust was created. Nathan seeks advice on whether the trustees are obligated to comply with Bella's demands. He also argues that, given the time and effort he has spent as a trustee, along with his unemployment in dedication to his work as trustee full-time, he should be entitled to remuneration and reimbursement for expenses incurred in performing his duties. He claims Brandon, Benji, and Simon have agreed to this payment. Furthermore, Benji, wanting to assist Nathan with his financial difficulties, offered to sell Nathan a house held under the trust, in which Benji has a full beneficial interest, at a price below market value. Earlier this year, Samantha consulted Benjamin's stockbrokers, who recommended investing in shares of a company listed on the stock exchange. Relying on their advice, and convinced by Samantha that further consultation was unnecessary, the trustees purchased the shares, as it was said to align with Benjamin's usual investments. However, the company has since gone into liquidation. With reference to the Trustee Act 1949 and relevant case laws, advise the parties on whether the trustees have breached their duties in relation to these matters.
Whether the trustees have the authority and duty to provide information by handing over the trust documents to Bella for beneficiary viewing.
For the first issue, whether the trustee have the authority and duty to provide information by handing over the trust document to Bella for beneficiary viewing. Under trust law, the trustee must maintain accurate records and provide beneficiaries access to them upon request, ensuring accountability and transparency. This obligation, known as the duty to provide trust accounts, requires trustee to keep proper records and furnish them along with supporting information whenever beneficiaries request. The case Springate and Dashwood 1860 established that neglecting to provide accounts constitute a breach of duty, even if trustee acts honorably in other respects. The court emphasized that trustees must keep their accounts up to date and grant beneficiaries access as needed. Similarly, in Mason and Coleman 2007, trustees who unjustifiably fail to produce accounts may be ordered to bear the cost of legal proceeding to obtain the accounts, as well as the costs associated with preparing and analyzing them. This highlights the legal consequences trustees face when neglecting their responsibilities. Beneficiaries also have a proprietary right to trust document, as confirmed in O'Rourke and Derbyshire 1920. As equitable owners of the trust property, beneficiaries are entitled to access trust records, reflecting their legitimate interest in trust administration. In Malaysia, the case involving Sundram Berhad and Benjamin Lim Keong Ho 2017 reinforced this duty. A removed beneficiary sought the trustee to challenge his exclusion. Despite the trustee objections, the court upheld the beneficiary's right to access trust documents, provided the request was related to verifying the administration of the trust. However, this right is not absolute. R.A. Londonderry Settlement 1965 highlighted an exception, distinguishing between trust document which beneficiaries can access and other materials, such as of record of a trustee's discretionary decision which remain confidential. This balance ensures transparency while protecting trustee decision-making processes. Moving on to application. Nathan and Samantha, as trustees, have a legal obligation to provide the trust accounts to the beneficiary, Bella, upon her request. Bella, as a beneficiary, is entitled to view trust document to ensure transparency and proper administration of the trust. However, trustees are not generally required to have the accounts audited unless explicitly stated in the trust document. In Springett and Dashwood 1860, it was emphasized that failing to provide trust accounts upon request is a breach of duty, even if the trustee act honorably in other respects. Bella claims that Nathan and Samantha have not kept proper accounts or arranged for audits, which could be seen as a violation of their fiduciary duty. The trustees must keep the accounts updated and accessible to beneficiaries as part of their responsibility, and failure to do so would breach their obligation. If Nathan and Samantha fail to provide the accounts, Bella may incur legal expenses to obtain them. As highlighted in Mason and Coleman 2007, this served as a deterrent for non-compliance, reinforcing the importance of openness. Beneficiaries like Bella have the right to view trust accounts to identify any breaches of trust and ensure the trustees are managing the trust in their best interest. In Infolin, Citram Berhad and Benjamin Lim Kyung Ho 2017, it was established that a beneficiary has a right to trust documents under the court supervisory jurisdiction. Bella is entitled to access the trust document to verify whether the trust is being administered in compliance with its terms, even if she believes the distribution of the trust is unfair or biased. However, R.E. Londonderry's settlement 1965 limits a beneficiary's rights to access certain records. While Bella can request trust documents, she cannot access records that disclose the trustee's justification for their discretionary decisions. These distinctions balances the trustee's need for confidentiality with the beneficiary's right to transparency. To be concluded, Nathan and Samantha have the duty to provide information and authority to hand over the trust document to Bella as beneficiary of the trust as an act of accountability and openness as trustee, but however the trustee also have the duty to restrict the beneficiary from viewing the trust document. This is because the trustee are expected to fulfill their duties by providing the required accounts and maintaining openness, but they are not required to justify the arbitrary choices until expressly requested.
Whether Nathan and Samantha have the duty to provide the trust accounts to the beneficiaries and are under duty to get the accounts audited.
The next issue is whether Nathan and Samantha have the duty to provide the trust accounts to the beneficiaries and are under duty to get the accounts audited. Under trustee law, trustees are required to maintain accurate records of the trust and grant beneficiaries access to them upon request. This duty is called duty to provide trust accounts. Beneficiaries have the right to view trust accounts at certain periods, as highlighted in cases like Springett and Dashwood. The case highlights the duty of the trustee to keep trust accounts up to date and grant access upon request from a beneficiary, even if trustees act honorably in other ways. Trustees must maintain accurate and current accounts upon request as per Mason and Coleman. Neglecting to provide these accounts may result in legal action expenses, highlighting the responsibility of trustees for taking and analyzing audit accounts. Beneficiaries' fundamental right to trust management is emphasized in Armitage and Nurse, requiring trustees to preserve and grant access to trust accounts. This ensures trustees fulfill their duties and allow beneficiaries to monitor trustee activities. The obligation to provide trust accounts typically doesn't include audited accounts unless specified otherwise. Trustees can request annual audits under Section 27, subsection 4, unless frequent audits are reasonable. Audit expenses are to be paid from the trust property's capital or income. Section 28 allows trustees to hire agents for trust-related tasks, including account maintenance, if they are hired in good faith. The War and Seed case illustrates how illiterate trustees can legitimately hire agents for account maintenance. So therefore, Nathan and Samantha as trustees have a duty to provide the beneficiary with the trust accounts upon request. They are not, however, generally obligated to have the finances audited unless the trust instrument expressly calls for it. The Springett and Dashwood case ruling emphasized the fiduciary obligation of the trustees, Nathan and Samantha, to maintain up-to-date trust accounts, as failure to do so may breach their fiduciary duty to manage the account openly. Mason and Coleman and Armitage and Nurse highlight legal consequences for trustees neglecting trust accounts, potentially resulting in Bella's legal fees. Both cases emphasize transparency and disincentives against non-compliance, ensuring beneficiary rights to trust accounts. Nathan and Samantha can submit audited accounts once a year, if appropriate, under Section 27, subsection 4 of the trust agreement. They can also appoint representatives, including accountants, to oversee and preserve the trust accounts applying Section 28. The 4 and C allows Nathan and Samantha to hire an agent in good faith, ensuring trustees aren't personally liable for the agency's fault. Therefore, Nathan and Samantha as trustees are obligated to provide accurate trust accounts and promptly respond to beneficiaries' requests. They may hire agents for account administration, but auditing is not required unless instructed.
Whether a trustee can be held liable for the investment losses incurred by the trust due to their reliance on the advice of a stockbroker, considering the applicable standards of care.
Assalamualaikum. My name is ELEENA and I will be presenting to you the third issue. So, the issue concerns whether the trustees, Nathan and Samantha, can be held liable for the investment losses incurred by a trust due to their reliance on the advice of a stockbroker, considering the applicable standard of care. So, the law for this case is trustees have a fiduciary obligation to manage trust investment prudently as established in Reg 1919. The investment should be made with intention of generating returns, and trustees must differentiate between usual investment, which are safe and prudent, and unusual, which is riskier investment. So, for example, in the case of repower, purchasing a house for a beneficiary occupation which yielded no income, it was deemed an improper investment. So, under Section 6 of the Trustee Act, trustees must diversify investments, also assess risk level, and ensure that the investment align with the trust's objective, which this was under Section 6, subsection 1. Even if an investment is authorized, trustee may still be held liable if it is unsuitable for the trust. Trustees are also obligated to seek proper advice, which stated under Section 6, subsection 2, from qualified professionals such as stockbroker or accountants. And also, they need to confirm this advice in writing, which stated under Section 6, subsection 3 and Section 6, subsection 5. Case law has clarified the standard of care required of trustees. Lay trustees are expected to act ordinary prudence person would managing their own affair as stated in Risk Right. If trustees lack special knowledge or of investment, they can meet their duty by acting reasonably and relying on a professional advice. This principle was echoed in Leroy against Whiteley 1887, which emphasized that trustees must consider welfare of beneficiary with ordinary prudence. Additionally, the case of Cohen against Cargill 1985, it clarified that trustees must act only in good faith, but also prudently and reasonably. So for professional trustees, however, are held on a higher standard of care due to their expertise, as seen in the case of Bartlett against Barclay Banks 1980. Professional trustees must exercise greater diligence as their specialized skills demand a higher level of accountability. So in the case of Nestle against National Westminster Bank 1994, the court emphasized that the modern portfolio approach, where trustees are judged based on management of the entire portfolio rather than individual investments. Trustees are not liable under performance unless result from mismanagement. So to apply in this case, Samantha demonstrated awareness of her duty to invest prudently by consulting a stockbroker. This aligned with the obligation under the case of rewrite and also under Section 6, subsection 1 to generate returns for the trust. Her reliance on the stockbroker's advice suggests that an effort to fulfill her fiduciary duty to act in the trust's best interest. Although Samantha did not document her stockbroker's advice as required under Section 6, subsection 5, this obligation may not amount to a breach if the advice was sound good faith. Trustees are responsible for ensuring that professional advice align with trust objective, as highlighted in the case of Cohen against Cargill 1985. If the advice was reasonable and unforeseen factors such as market fluctuations or dishonesty led to the losses, Samantha and Nathan may not be held liable, as established in the case of Leroy against Whiteley. Nathan and Samantha are lay trustees, not professionals. Therefore, they are not subjected to higher standard of care outlined in Bartlett against Barclay Bank. They are only required to exercise the care expected of ordinary prudent individuals. Furthermore, there are no evidence of mismanagement or deviation from accepted practice. Align the action with the principle in the case of Nestle against National Westminster Bank. So to conclude, Nathan and Samantha are likely to be held liable for the investment losses. They acted reasonably and prudently and in a good faith by relying on the stockbroker's professional advice. As a lay trustee, they are not expected to possess any specialized skills or knowledge beyond their role, provided their actions align with the Trustees Act 1949 and relevant case law. They have fulfilled their fiduciary obligation, and the losses incurred by the trust would not render them personally liable. Thank you, that's all from me.
Whether Nathan should be entitled to remuneration and reimbursement for expenses incurred in performing his duties.
Hi everyone, so today I will address the fourth issue, whether Nathan as a trustee should be entitled to remunerations for his services and reimbursement for expenses incurred in performing his duties. So to clarify all of these, I will apply the ILAP framework, which is issue, law, application and also conclusion. Alright, let's get started. So under the trust law itself, the general rule is that the Trustee Act must be voluntarily and are not entitled to remunerations. So this is rooted in the principles of gratuitous service that ensures trustee to focus solely on their fiduciary obligations but not their personal benefits. And we can look at the case of Barrett and Hartley, where the trustee successfully managed the trust property for 6 years by generating profits for the beneficiaries. So despite all of his effort, the court held that he was not entitled to remunerations because the court emphasized that managing the trust itself is a part of the trustee duties and the financial compensation cannot be claimed unless explicitly authorized. However, there are 3 exceptions to this rule, where first, express authorizations in the trust instrument. So if the trust did explicitly allow remunerations, trustee can charge for their services. And for example, in the case of Chapel, the court allowed trustees to be paid because the trust instrument is expressly provided for it. So the second exception will be the court authorizations under Section 46 of the Trustee Act. So the court may authorize remunerations in cases where the beneficiaries agree that the trustee's expertise is necessary or their contributions are particularly valuable. So these principles was highlighted in Reed Duke of Norfolk Settlement Trust, where the court increased remunerations due to the trustee's exceptional workload and contributions. So the third exception that will be discussed is the statutory reimbursement under Section 35, Subsection 2 of the Trustee Act. So trustees can recover reasonable out-of-pocket expenses incurred in executing their duties, such as administrative costs or professional services. So we can apply all of these legal principles now in the Nathan situation, where Nathan claims that he should be paid for his effort as a trustee. However, bear in mind, as per the general rule that has been established in the case of Barrett and Hartley, the trustees cannot demand payment for performing their duties unless expressly authorized. So Nathan has accepted the role of trustees, knowing it requires him to act gratuitously, and he cannot now claim remuneration simply due to the personal sacrifices. So the first option does not apply here, because the trust instrument governing Benjamin Trust does not include any provisions authorizing remunerations. And we can look in Rechapel where the court made it clear that only trustees can be charged for their services if the trust explicitly allows it. So since Nathan Trust instrument lacks such a clause, he cannot demand a payment. So the second exception that will be discussed is the section 46 also fails in this case. While Nathan asserts that some beneficiaries like Brandon and Benji agreed to his remunerations, the agreement is still considered as invalid because Vanessa and Simon are still minors, and minors cannot provide legal consent, and thus making the beneficiaries' consent incomplete. So additionally, Nathan has not demonstrated that his services were uniquely or valuable or indispensable to the trust, unlike has been stated by the trustee in the Reed Duke of Norfolk settlement. So Nathan's contributions does not appear extraordinary or beyond the scope of ordinary trustee duties. And finally, under the third exceptions, which is Nathan is entitled for reimbursement to reasonable out-of-pocket expenses under Section 35, Section 2 of the Trustee Act. If Nathan has incurred legitimate expenses in executing his duties, such as administrative costs or professional assistance, he can recover these from the trust property. However, it is crucial to note that Nathan must provide clear evidence of these expenses to ensure transparency and fairness in the trust administration itself. And lastly, Nathan's proposal to purchase a house held under the trust at the below market price is a big problematic actually, because trustees have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of all beneficiaries and to avoid conflict of interest. So if Nathan proceeds with this transaction without the court approval or informed consent of all beneficiaries, it will constitute a breach of trust. And this mirrors the principle that trustees must not use their positions to personally gain unless expressly authorized. And so in conclusion itself, Nathan is not entitled to remunerations for his services because the trust instrument does not allow it, and the requirement for court authorized payment have not been met. However, Nathan has the right to reimbursement for reasonable expenses if he can provide documented evidence. And additionally, Nathan must avoid purchasing trust property at the below market price, as this will violate his fiduciary duty and jeopardize the beneficiary interest. So trustees must act impartially and uphold the integrity of the trust by prioritizing the beneficiary welfare above their own. So thank you for your attention, and this concludes my presentations on Nathan's entitlement to remunerations and reimbursements under trust law. So that's all. Thank you and goodbye.
Whether Benji can sell Nathan a house under the trust, which Benji has a full beneficial interest at a price below market value.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is ALIFF in the NORMUZLEADY, and today I'm going to discuss on the fifth issue regarding our question. The fifth issue discuss on the topic of whether Benji can sell to Nathan a house under the trust property in which Benji has a full beneficial interest at a price below the market value. There are several laws that could be applied under this issue. The first law is the fiduciary duty of a trustee, as Benji as a trustee. The trustee hold a fiduciary duty and must not receive any personal benefit from their position as a trustee towards the trust property. They must avoid conflicts between their duty to the beneficiaries and personal interests themselves. If a conflict arises between the trustee and also the beneficiaries, then the trustee must be held accountable from the profit that has been made by them. As further discussed in the case of Bray and Ford, it established the principles of inflexible rule, whereby that is fiduciary must not make a profit unless it is expressly authorized under the trust property or the trust agreement. To apply this law under this fifth issue, the trustee in this case, which is the Benji, must act in the best interest of the beneficiaries. He must avoid any conflicts between the personal interest and also the trustee's obligation. And further discussed in the case of Bray and Ford, any profits that derive from such a conflict constitute a breach of a trust of the agreement. Secondly, the law that could be applied is conflict of interest in selling the house to Nathan. As per discussed in the case of Kitch and Sanford, the trustee must avoid personal benefit from the trust property, even in any unavoidable circumstances of the situation. The trustee who obtained a lease for personal gain was held accountable for all the profit that made from the selling of the house or the property. To apply this law towards the fifth issue, the selling the trust property to Nathan, a co-trustee, below market value creates a direct conflict of interest between the trustee, which is the Benji, and the beneficiaries. Benji's motivation to assist Nathan to comprise his duty act impartially. In the case of Kitch and Sanford, where prioritizing personal interest over the trust obligation considered a breach of trust, and Benji's duty to the beneficiaries is subordinated to personal consideration amounting to a breach. Next, we will discuss to the two rules under this law, which is the first rule is the self-dealing rule. Self-dealing rule, which is a trustee are prohibited from purchasing the trust property for themselves as per discussed in the case of Campbell and Walker. Meanwhile, the transaction involving a self-dealing are avoidable at the request of any dissatisfied beneficiaries of a trust property. Prevent the trustees from purchasing at undervalued prices or selling at inflated prices is the purpose of this rule. And it is also reaffirmed in the case of ROSLAN Trust and also Wright and Morgan. Also, it is to indirect attempts to exploit trust property are also prohibited as per discussed in the case of Parker and McKenna. To apply this rule, the prohibits trustee from purchasing or selling the trust property for personal benefit as per discussed in the Campbell and Walker. It established that such transactions are avoidable at the request of any beneficiaries that has been dissatisfied. It is strictly enforced to prevent exploitation of a trustee position. And selling the property below market value comprises trust assets and such as favoritism towards Nathan by the trustee, i.e. Benji, and it is violates the trustee's duty of impartially further underscoring the breach of the trust. Last but not least, the fair dealing rule. It applies when the trustee purchases the beneficiary interest of the beneficiary. Transactions are not automatically voidable but must meet strict fairness requirement as per discussed in the T2 and Medal and Cool and Therapeutic held that such transaction must be transparent with no fraud or concealment. To apply this law, it applies when the trustee interacts with beneficiary interest in the trust property. Trustee must prove the transaction was fair with full disclosure and without undue influence. As per discussed in the case of Co and Therapeutic, it requires transparency and no exploitation. The below market prices shows or suggests the unfairness and the transaction likely improper as it fails to protect the interests of all trustees of all trust parties in the trust property. To conclude, the fifth issue, in conclusion, Benji's proposed sale of the house held under the trust to Nathan at a price below the market value violates both the self-dealing and the fair dealing rules. The self-dealing rules outright prohibit such transaction due to the inherent conflicts between Benji's fiduciary obligation and his personal interest. Even when analysed under the fair dealing rule, the transaction will fail because it lacks of fairness, full disclosure, and the informed consent of all beneficiaries. And to uphold his fiduciary duty, Benji must act impartially and prioritize the interests of trust and its beneficiaries of the trust property, refraining from any actions that compromise his role or result in a breach of a trust. That's all from me. Thank you.
It's the end. Goodbye, guys.
Goodbye, everyone. See you later. Bye.
Bye.